Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Are you there with me? I'm with you. It is April 8th, 2021. I don't see anybody in the live chat. Well, let me begin. I'll pop it out to see if anybody shows. Oh, okay. You're there. Wonderful. Great. Okay, let me begin, and perhaps I should go into the live chat a little bit more today, depending on how much material I feel I need to cover. Thank you for joining me. And today's talk is titled PsychoTrigger Word-Magick. And you notice I spell the word magic with a K. That is not a misprint, intentional. And that's an allusion to our friend, and I mean that ironically. He's not my friend. Hopefully he's not yours. Aleister Crowley, the Magus, the self-described most evil man in the world, who talked about magic, the dark arts, with distinguishing it from the generic or white magic, perhaps, by using the K. And I'll be using the word magic with the K to talk about the dark side of written word. And if you were with me last time, and I hope you were, and if not, please go back to that one. I think it was a pretty good talk, even though it inspired not a lot, but some people were quite upset about the comments I had about Robin Williams. And I'll let you. I don't know if those comments made it in there. I don't really censor anything, but and I did answer back some of the fools that wrote me. Because I just didn't want them to mistake me for any number of the YouTube celebrities out there who put other people out there, people well known to the public for purposes of clickbait. I had something, well, more than something, I had a number of very important points to make about Robin Williams, if you care to check it out. So today, from the master of spoken word, and few people would dispute that claim, the master of the spoken word, Robin Williams, the king of comedic improvisation. And to call it comedic doesn't really capture the full scope of his genius. But anyway, I already gave that talk, so let's move on. From the master of the spoken word, Robin Williams, today I'm going to turn my attention to the power of the written word. And yes, the written word is still important, even though a lot of what passes for entertainment has moved over into the visual and the audio world. Well, before you can even get to that dimension, all this has to be kind of sketched out. Let me just give you a very quick example. And I'm going through this book that it wasn't cheap, even used, thanks to the generosity of my patrons at Patreon. I was able to acquire this book called Inside the Black Mirror. All these incredible stories here that are rendered in film or in television format, recorded video, right? Start out as concepts, start out as written scripts, written words. It always starts from the written word when you're talking about modern theater, perhaps in the days of Aeschylus, perhaps they would transmit everything through the oral tradition, but that was quite some time ago. So the point is that the written word is as powerful as ever. It's probably more powerful because most people don't really regard it as being that important anymore. And that's true to some extent because it's not valued. The written word, unless you're the producers like Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones, unless you're up at the top tier writer like that, if you're a writer, you're going to be struggling. Yeah, we know that. That's nothing new, but you're not going to be able to make a living at it. You have to have a day job, as they said about Elvis. And or you have to teach, which it's not a bad gig, but there are any number of frustrated or thwarted writers who are in academia, and the worst of all of them seem to be clustered in so-called creative writing programs, where they bring people in who aspire to be writers like themselves, and they promise them, I guess, instruction, tutorials, experience, war stories that, and along, by the end of the program, you also get a degree, an MFA, typically, Master of Fine Arts, which I suppose will qualify you to, in turn, teach writing somewhere else. And I mentioned because the institutionalization of professional writing and writers is one of the factors that has led to its decline. It was, well, I guess it is now, quite a long time ago. I was reading about, the truth is, I was reading The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It's a long short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald, one of my favorites and probably yours. And yeah, everybody likes Fitzgerald, everybody likes Hemingway, but don't let that prevent you from liking him as well, because they are highly regarded for a reason. I couldn't find any occult, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't find any occult meaning in the written word so far as The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I did see most of the feature film starring Brad Pitt on it, and I couldn't really glean anything from there either. But not all is lost. What I've discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that once upon a time, writers of his statute, F. Scott Fitzgerald, by 1929, he was making $4,000 per story. Now, that's big bucks in 2021. He was writing for the Saturday Evening Post. I think that it's dead. I don't know when it died. It's one of those magazines that, most middle class, well, not most, but a large number of middle class households had. They'd pick it up at the newsstand, right? $4,000 story. And in today's currency, that's about $50,000. $50,000 for a story? You could make a pretty good living as a writer. You sell one story today, you could live off a year if you live frugally. You sell two stories, you're in the middle class and you're still struggling, You sell three stories, wow, you're rolling in the clover there. And you know the story of Zelda and F. Scott and how they went to Hollywood and drank themselves to death. So I won't belabor that point. I'm just stressing, or trying to put it in context, the nature of commercial writing today. And I'll also be bringing in how guess what? How the intelligence agencies moved into writing on the heels of people like Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and took over MFA programs, Master of Fine Arts. It's a book called Finks, written by Joel Whitney. Very well researched. I had not an inkling, but I've read previous work, people like Francis Stoner talking about the hijacking of the arts, expressive arts by intelligence agencies. And it would be in their interest to capture it, because, well, not just for propaganda. Yeah, that's the easy explanation, but to really get into the spirit and nature of what humanity, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm not going to talk about Bernays. Everybody knows about his classic little pamphlet, Propaganda. You know that Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud and helped to I guess, weaponize the insights of his famous uncle, who was living in exile in London, and was very anxious, by the way, for Bernays to spread his fame far and wide. And of course, Edward Bernays became, I guess, the godfather of the modern advertising industry. Yeah, you know all that. I'm going to go deeper than that. I'm going to go into what I have called the PsychoTrigger, with the Word-Magick that we all know and love. Oh, by the way, again, I want to thank my Patreons, people. I was able to get this book. I'm going to review it and see if I can build a talk around it. You may know the author, Ingo Swann. He's a famous remote viewer. Remember the Stanford Research Institute experiments, Hal Puthoff, and by the way, I found out he's still around. He's giving talks and he's thriving. Anyway, Ingo Swann was one of the they call them remote viewers now, but he was one of the people with exceptional cognitive or precognitive or paracognitive ability for remote viewing experiments. And he did this book called The Great Apparitions of Mary, an examination of 22 supranormal appearances. Why am I interested in this now? Well, I think there's a good possibility, a strong possibility, that there will be some sort of apparitions that are going to be put out there for our consumption as part of a larger psyops. We've seen one after another. People are suffering from live shooter fatigue, right? Hey, it's Fort Deja. Okay, just another one of those, right? So the people who like to keep us in perpetual fear and alarm, in a state of anxiety, right? W.H. Auden, after World War II, said we are in the age of anxiety. By the way, W.H. Auden was one of these people who were handled by the intelligence community, the alphabet agencies. So I'm going to be going into this book a little bit and talk about apparitions. And you know that they're possible now. Proof of concept took place a few years ago at one of the Coachella live music concerts, and a giant hologram of Tupac Shakur came up on stage. So we know that it's feasible. Okay. With that, let me launch in. Oh, let me also advertise. I wanted to thank everybody for coming into the office hours yesterday. I apologize for not taking into consideration that StreamYard does not admit more than 6 or 10 people at one time. And I had a great turnout. At its peak, I had almost 20. It was 19 people. And that's gratifying. I wanted to grow. It's kind of nice. We got to chat. And but we could make room for more people, and we had an interesting discussion. I took a lot of notes, and I'm following up on a lot of material. It helps me in my own writing, my own thinking, my own research. I try to keep open to all different types of developments everywhere, and I appreciate that participate, and I appreciate your support. I apologize to those who couldn't get into the StreamYard. What we did, or I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been maybe start up another stream on Zoom, which I think I'm going to be using, even though, as you know, it's controlled by certain forces that we don't like snooping on us. But, that seems to be the norm these days. We will resist that as long as we can, but we'll also use the tools that are available to talk amongst ourselves and discuss our strategies for liberation from this type of surveillance. Anyway, we'll do Zoom next month. I look forward to seeing you all there. Everybody's welcome. You do have to be a member of Patreon. You can join for $5. You can join for 1 month and have a look-see. Or you can join and get all these interesting posts that I have there. And they're fairly wide-ranging. I have, as you can tell by my talks, my tastes are fairly eclectic, and they're way upstream from most of the material you're going to see on YouTube, and they're definitely way upstream from what you see in academia. Most of your full professors are teaching the same material that they started out with 30, 40 years. When they might come out of grad school for about 5, 6 years until they get tenure, perhaps, 7-year point. They're hot shots, and they have some kind of something new to say, perhaps. But after that, it's for most people, it's all downhill. And I took it upon myself. I challenge myself to remain vital throughout my career, my professional career, and beyond it, because I don't identify so much as an academic as I do as a writer. That's why I got into academia, because I wanted to enter the ranks of these people. I didn't have a chance. I didn't, this is one of the reasons why it's important for you to understand that you might be trying to, if you're younger, if you're in the early stages of your career, or if you're finished with your career, if it's any large institution, at some point you will find out that it's not what it appears to be. And some of my favorite writers, like Shirley Jackson, I've read her in 8th grade, 7th grade. We all read The Lottery, the short story, by gosh. And I'm rereading her again, but through a different lens, through the lens of PsychoTrigger Word-Magick. And I'll get back. She inspired today's talk, by the way. I finished reading the novella, or the long short story, called The Haunting of Hill House, which was made into a movie. I haven't seen it yet, or maybe I have. I forgot it. but I have to check it out. But I wanted to read the literary source, and I just finished it yesterday. I think I read it in 3 sittings. I'm a fairly slow reader. Not only because I'm taking notes, but I kind of like to pore over it and really get into the rhythms and but this was so engaging and it really flowed that I read it uncharacteristically quickly for me. I won't go through the story itself. This is the Library of America edition. It's really nicely bound, good paper, and it's edited by Joyce Carol Oates, who's a very important figure in American letters, short story writer, novelist, and critic, and really good editor. This is an excellent edition. I've started also, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That's supposedly it's the better story. I mean, Hill House is incredible. Maybe I'll do a more full critique of that. But what I wanted to state is that it's female writers who I think really capture the Gothic underpinnings of American culture and society. I haven't come to a definitive conclusion at this point, but I'm leaning really strongly toward an understanding of what America is at bottom. And that's important for us to understand because we're in a desperate situation. How did we get here? We're here, I believe, because we have this history and we haven't overcome it yet. We haven't even started to overcome it because we don't really understand Shirley Jackson. We don't fully understand Edgar Allan Poe. We don't fully understand Herman Melville. All the people that you hated in school or junior high school or high school, you didn't want to read that stuff. The language was so unwieldy, and we wanted, I was the same way. I wanted to go home and watch American Bandstand or watch cartoons, right? Looney Tunes. But anyway, that aside, even if you are lettered, even if you are an English major, you might have an advanced, you might have an MFA. You, for the most part, not all of you, but you in general, the educated public or the seemingly educated public has never really understood the nature of American arts and letters. And yes, I'll go ahead. I'll go on the record now. It's steeped in the Gothic. It is steeped in the occult. It's steeped in the esoteric. And not just the European tradition that we are more acquainted with, not from the Abrahamic traditions, Islam, and we're going to look at some articles here that cite the influence of the Arabic tradition in Western occultism. I'm not going to go too nerdy on that, but just to show you that what we're dealing with here today, ladies and gentlemen, here and now and forever, we're dealing with a universal. It's coming not from Europe, but from Northern Africa, definitely amongst indigenous people here in the U.S. From Asia, we got a lot of that in the 50s with the sort of the Buddhism and Zen, kind of pop Zen coming in, and the yogic influences. And now it's a fashion statement. You got yoga pants, right? But anyway, the larger point I'm trying to make is that we, as a species, all around the world, and other societies seem to have grappled with it, acknowledged it, and embraced it, and integrated it more thoroughly and healthfully, I believe, than Americans have. We're still repressing the Gothic dimension of our lives. We're censoring it, repressing, we're pushing it down. And if you're even the least bit of a Freudian, you know that you can't really put a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. The wound is the Gothic imagination. And it's so deep that you've got your haunted houses, right? Even seemingly inanimate objects and landscapes will come back and haunt you and do you in. In the case here, this 32-year-old woman who went to this seance type of situation at this haunted house, she was kicked out of it. And I'm going to spoil it for you. Sorry, but she was driving her car, or her sister's car, which she had stolen. And as she's leaving Hill House, she decides, hey, I'm going to drive right into that giant tree right? That spooky giant tree that's been haunting her all along. Anyway. Oh, by the way, do I need to mention that Shirley Jackson herself identified as a witch? Not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal sense, she called herself. Now, some of her biographers say, she was just joking. She just wanted to get more publicity. And then she was writing for the New Yorker. She was making the big bucks, like maybe not as much as J.D. Salinger, who I'll talk about in a moment, or earlier F. Scott Fitzgerald, but she was an established writer, making her and her husband both, who, by the way, he was one of them pre-MFA writer type people. He would, I think he was at Bennington College, a liberal, for upper middle class people, the elite private college that caters to the social class that she despises. That's all and most of her stories about these people. She hates them all, right? So there's this fundamental alienation that we have as a nationality, but I think it's probably common around the world. There's a certain, in scriptures, whatever tradition you're talking about, talks about this fundamental alienation of human beings from their environment, from other human beings. And it's, to a certain extent, I guess their quest is about reintegrating our separateness, apartness from nature and from our fellow human beings and from the animal kingdom, right? So anyway, I don't want to wax too philosophical there. Let me talk about, let's see here, one of my favorite persons. And let me make an appeal. If you have any information or insights about Ira Levin, please let me know. Ira Levin is mostly known for Rosemary's Baby, right? You know the movie with Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes, and Ruth Gordon is that woman who is part of a witch coven in the heart of New York City, of all places, right? And of course, the connection with Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski was married to Sharon Tate. You know what happened to her. About Charles Manson and Operation Chaos and all the story there. I've talked a lot about that already. But what's really interesting to me is, who is Ira Levin? And what came up in the discussion yesterday amongst the Patreons, because I asked, who is Maria Orsich? I can't find anything on her. And she's written about her, about all over the place, and her beautiful pictures there. It looks like a modern photo. This woman who looks like an unearthly goddess, Maria Orsich, with the long hair, which supposedly served as an antenna where she could pick up frequencies from the cosmos. There's almost nothing written about her. And I even looked at the alternate spellings of her name. Well, not so rare, but very difficult to find, are references to one Ira Levin. I suspect Ira Levin, the author of not just Rosemary's Baby, but he also authored The Stepford Wives. I think that's been made into a movie or two. The remakes are probably, usually worse than the original. And I think it was a Netflix. It might have been. But Stepford Wives, the premise. If you don't, go check it out. I don't, in the interest of time, I won't go through that. But the point is, Ira Levin's written a number of novels that have entered into our imagination, our imaginative universe. And I want to find out what he did. What did he do in the war? I suspect, like W.H. Auden, like J.D. Salinger, like people such as Joseph Heller, I think they were in the military. U.S. military. And I think, and Dr. Seuss, of course, as we've discussed before, he was in military, the Signal Corps and propaganda. But I think Ira Levin was probably in the Signal Corps doing propaganda or doing intelligence, right? But I can't find any references to him. I think he's an important writer. He might not be the most elegant stylist, right, that we've come across, but the topics, the themes, and the fact that his word magic has become part of our collective imagination and awareness and our culture makes him an important writer by at least by my estimation. Let's see here. There's there's a lot of nonsense, mostly written by frustrated writers who became academics, who write about Levin. There's an essay about Rosemary's Baby. I won't go nerdy on you here. It's a film review and, the usual stuff, right? It's published in the International Journal of Jungian Studies, 2018. I mean, it's an industry, a veritable industry. Here's another, probably has, it's an academic feminist type piece of criticism. By the way, one of the reasons why I do these talks is because I want to overthrow the domination, the hegemonic domination over the past 30, 40 years of race, class, gender, and queer studies. When they say gender, they mean almost exclusively gay studies. I want to throw that over, and as I've stated in other talks, I want to substitute that with crypto studies, not cryptocurrency, but crypto history, cryptozoology, cryptobiology. And we can see, by the way, that our favorite investigative reporter features one of these mad scientists, Foussier, right, who's one of the figures responsible for our enslavement, a la Gothic, global. We've gone global in Gothic imagery. He's a cryptid. He's half human and half unknown, reptilian, right? He's a cryptid. So, the cryptozoological and the crypto studies are, you know, it's beginning to aerosolize through the intellectual environment here. And we're going to stop reading about feminist readings of Rosemary's Baby. Oh, the oppressed woman under an oppressive patriarchal order decides to sleep with the devil and give birth to the devil's spawn, whatever it is. So Ira Levin is one of them. Let me talk